In this video, we're going to take a look at how we compare and order integers. To begin with, it's important to understand what integers are. Integers are the set of all values beginning at negative infinity, okay, but numbers like -5, -2, 0, 1, 6, 9, okay, so on and so forth. It's basically any number that doesn't have a decimal or isn't a fraction, okay, at least not how it can be most simply written, but it can be both positive and negative, okay. So if we begin by just looking at 0, we say anything to the right of 0 is what's known as a positive integer. The sign on the number is a positive value. Anything to the left of 0, coming before 0, is what's known as a negative integer. So for example, -7 would be a negative integer because of the little negative sign in front of the number, where positive integers would have a positive sign if you were to write it. Most times we don't need to write it. Okay. When we begin to look at what's called absolute value, given by the symbol of 2 lines, okay, would say a number in the middle of 3, or it could be the absolute value of -3. What the absolute value of something is it's actually the distance away from 0. So when I begin to look at what the distance away from 0 is, well, if I take 3, how many spaces away from 0 is 3? Well, it's going to be 3 spaces. Okay, it's always going to be positive. Absolute value is always going to be positive. Okay, once I take what the absolute value of a number is, it's always just going to equal a positive value with no absolute value signs around it. Well, if I look at -3, well, -3 is also 3 spaces away from 0. Okay, this is important because if I talk about opposites, an example of this would be 3 and -3. So the absolute value of each of these numbers is the same exact thing. So the opposite is basically when I have the same numerical part, but one's going to be positive, one's going to be negative. Okay. So when we begin to use integers, you may have to evaluate what a phrase is. Basically, if I give you something like 5 minus x, and then I tell you that x is equal to -7, what that would basically mean, and we're going to need to probably do a little bit more practicing on how to add and subtract, but just to begin to introduce, remember, I would do 5 minus, because that's what's given to me, but then I would plug in a -7. Anytime I subtract a negative, the goal with the subtraction sign here is to change this to a positive, which means I would also need to change the sign of the number that follows it. So 5 plus 7 would then equal 12. This would be known as evaluating the expression. Okay, so just keep an eye out for this. You're going to have to do a little bit of this, probably not this complicated with as far as signs yet, because we need to practice adding and subtracting signs, but at least this will begin to kind of introduce this. The other thing just to watch out for is if I have to order 2 numbers. So let's say I want to put in order from least to greatest: 5, -12, and -8. Okay, -12 would be over here on the number line, -8 might be here, 5 would be here. So if I have to put from least to greatest, the largest negative value will be the least. Okay, in this case negative 12, then I kind of work my way up the number line from left to right. So I start over here on the left and kind of go this way, always to the right. So my values will be negative 12, negative 8, and 5. Okay, so this is basically how we compare and how we order integers. Look forward to practicing some tomorrow.